Hello and welcome back to the QMed Academy talks and also our YouTube sessions about medical device development and a walkthrough of the different steps and documentations you will need to go through if you are working with this the first time developing a medical device. And with me today I have Søren, one of our subject matter experts from QMed, and today we are going to talk about
risk management.
It's all yours. Søren.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very much a talked about subject. So risk management is seen in a lot of different instances. You have your company risk management. That's something else. That's not what we're going to talk about. You have your clinical study risk management. That applies a little, yes. But so risk management can come in many forms. But when we talk about medical devices, as we do, risk management is a documentation package, pretty much. And you need to follow a given standard. And that being the ISO 14179, 791.
All these numbers.
Yes, sorry.
We will show it in the chat.
We will. The correct number. No, but and the thing is that when you need to follow the standard, the output should also follow it, right? So, and there are like two different things we see. One is very established companies that have I would say, outdated risk management. And then we have new companies that have a very hard time of adapting it. Of course, we also have clients that are very good at it. So it's not like we don't see that. But it can be challenging. And like the one main thing we need to take out of it is that it's about the patient. And that especially goes to older version of risk management. And this, I mentioned, like the company risks. You know, the competent authorities don't care. They want to know what is the risk for patients. So it's very patient focused. And besides that, it's a process that you need to go through. And there are certain documents that need to be in your risk management.
So where to start? What do you do first?
What do you do first? I think a very good start would be to create a plan. That is one of the documents that you need. It's a risk management plan. Because you have your standard sort of dictating how you come from a risk to a hazard to a harm and how you then evaluate and mitigate. But besides that, there are also certain items that you need to have in your plan describing how you are actually going to evaluate risks.
Yeah.
And that is not fixed. So your plan needs to show how have you done your risk management, pretty much. And an example could be that if you have a very high risk device, it could be a valve transplant. Heart valve transplant, sorry. Those devices are high risk and you would actually expect people to die. It's of course unlikely, but due to the patient's conditions, the procedure being very overwhelming on the system, the outcome unfortunately leads to death quite often. Therefore, their risk management to handle something like death is definitely a lot different than if you take an example of a software we talked about earlier in the videos. Is that for a software, if you die of a software, there is something wrong. Of course, there are instances where a software gives results that could lead to death, but so the interpretation, and there are two words here, it's probabilities and severity. Those ratings are dependent on your device, and you need to do it for each device you have. So that can be a manufacturer having 20 devices, then they have 20 different risk management plans.
And you basically, these are, when you look into the risk management standard of the number that we can't remember, but these ratings, you can actually adapt this.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's important that it is you as the one who owns the device who puts together the list of harms that can actually happen.
Yeah.
And I would say tips and tricks here is to standardize your list of harms.
Yeah.
And base it on literature. It's a common finding that this list is not really, you can't link it to your clinical literature evaluation. And also you can't link it to your clinical study if you had one of these, or your biological testings. So it really needs to be of relevance. And of course, again, to your use case.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. With the probabilities and severities, then I would say the norm is a 5 scale, meaning that you have a severity going from 1 to 5, where 5 is most often the most severe one. But it's also seen a 4 scale. Works in the same way. You just don't have sort of a middle ground.
No.
You have one or the other.
Yeah.
I would definitely, I think from QMED side, we always recommend a 5 scale. And there is also someone using a 10 scale, but in my mind, it's just a 5 scale double up. And like to talk about when we have these risks, it is very important to align them, because a normal risk management plan would then sort of set the stage on how you're going to evaluate it. And that is a separate document called a risk analysis or hazard traceability matrix. It depends a little on how you name it, but it's the same thing. So you list all your risks to certain stages where your device is used. So going from production to packaging, shipping, pre-operation, during operation, after operation, and maybe also follow-up. Not follow-up, but if it's a implant.
Long-term.
Yeah, long-term follow-up. So there are certain different risks that needs to be evaluated, and still towards the patient. Now I say patient, of course, there are some risks that is also related to the user.
And third party, I think, you know, say there are 3 legs.
Yeah, a third party can also be environment, actually. There are some devices that include certain metals or certain toxic in the case that it can accumulate in the environment. So sometimes you actually need to evaluate third parties, I should say, but in your risk traceability matrix or risk analysis, you then go through each risk that you can think of. And doing that, you need to set a team. That's super important because there are different input. Like I mentioned, in your production area, you might have someone that is an expert there that can see certain risks that can come to a patient. You might have a medical, someone within the medical field that can give you risk and also give you sort of the severity. Because sometimes it's hard to evaluate what can actually happen unless you have someone with medical knowledge to say, well, for example, a good example is during production, an uneven surface can create a bleeding. So that would be an harm, the bleeding. But bleeding in itself then can be, is it a severe bleeding?
Yeah.
Would I die from the bleeding? Or is it just a minor cut in your skin, right? So having someone with medical knowledge trying to evaluate what is actually the...
And put it in boxes, right?
Exactly.
That you will then keep the very important points as important, but the rest you should leave, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then what you see is when you start to develop your risk analysis, that you would have the same harm coming up again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And that is actually a good thing.
Mm.
So in the end, what you create is a list of harms. And those harms should be visible in your IFU. So you actually need to show to your user and probably also patients what harms can actually come of this device.
Yeah.
And we are not talking procedure harms. We are talking device harms. What does your device create of harms?
And I think that, again, this traceability, I know that it's not released yet, but there is a link to the new ISO 14155 that are actually updating the risk part.
Yeah.
Because they want to see that we are actually able to, from this hazard traceability matrix, to implement these risks or see the risk out there in the documentation and the data and get these back into the hazard traceability matrix as a mitigation of the risk, again, on an ongoing basis. So this is a document that will never be finalized, basically. It always needs update during the lifetime of the product.
Yeah, it is so that for each time that you get, so you created your harm, you're going through the risk from a hazard to a harm, and that harm to a certain risk would then be mitigated, meaning that you would try to, you can never lower the severity because a severe bleeding is always a severe bleeding. But you can lower the probability by mitigating it. And that could be through your, as you say, clinical studies or whatever it is. Meaning that once you then have performed your clinical study, you need to re-evaluate if the probability of that occurrence is actually correct. And it is actually a finding that we see mostly in clinical studies, because the clinical investigation plan is not really complete in that area. So it's a feedback we get from competent authorities is that we don't have the values. We don't know if it's 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10.
No.
So it's also difficult for them to actually evaluate what is the severity of what they're proving.
And what other input documents do you need to conduct a risk management or has a traceability matrix?
Yeah. Of course, set the team. And then besides that, have a state-of-the-art ready. We are going to get into that when we talk about clinical evaluation, but it's creating a medical background. That's one thing. But in the state-of-the-art, you're getting your values pretty much. So an occurrence of death, well, that might be, in the case I mentioned with the valve, 1 to 10%. That is the value that you put into your probability because it comes from a source, right?
Yeah.
And it can be a clinical guidance or whatever it is. And then besides that, you can also have your ISO standards coming in with some, but most of it actually comes from state-of-the-art. And when I say state-of-the-art, it also means vigilance. So if we have a generic device type, the valves, catheters, guide wires, stents, whatever it is, there is a very big background information that you can use for malfunctions, certain things that we already know can happen. Well, then you need to have it in your risk management.
And when you have then you conduct the exercise, completing the hazard traceability matrix, you do your testing on an ongoing basis, and you mitigate your risks, either through literature or testing or clinical data, whatever, usability. And then there is this, you of course need to report of the result, and the residual risk is quite important here in the further communication, both to the users and so on. Can you touch upon that, both the report and residual risk?
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, you actually mentioned sort of not the last document, but the kind of the conclusive documents of the plan and the analysis is, of course, you have your report. And in your report, you are obliged to report on the residual risk to the harms that you have.
So how do you find that? How do you find the residual risk? What's the exercise here?
Yeah, the exercise is during your analysis. I would say it's a fun exercise, but it's no. But initially, when you actually start your device development, you would see that your probability is very high because it's unknown. And once you get into a more established, maybe a production procedure, or you have a more established device on the market, well, your probability might even lower further than you initially estimated, because you might also get post-market surveillance feedback. So, but there needs to be a rationale for mitigating, meaning lowering the probability. And often it you can mitigate by design, but you can also mitigate by information. And you prove that by clinical studies, usability studies, as you say. And in the end, you would have a mitigated risk that you then need to communicate.
So it is a risk that even though it's mitigated, it will not become below a certain level. When you multiply normally the probability and the severity. And these are the risks that you will have as residual risk, that you will communicate to all the stakeholders that these are the risks, like with the heart valve. And also the case that we are working with, there will be some risk. An endoscope can perforate. It can happen. If it happens, it's very severe. You can die.
And
therefore, you will have to communicate that in your instructions for use, even though that the likelihood is really low.
But and then you can say what is really low. Well, it depends on your device. Really low for death could be 1 in a million, but it can certainly also be low if it's 1 in 100.
But this is where you, in your plan, you define your matrix, right, of the severity and probability. And based on, that's the literature or the state of the art, and this is how we will divide between something that we will need to communicate and something which is really irrelevant.
Yeah, because most of the analysis is not going to be reviewed other than if you submit it to a competent authority or FDA or something like that, notified body, then they are going to review it. But most of the information is contained within the harms and then the residual risk, meaning those values that you talk about. That is what you need to communicate. And a well-known example is when we look at if you buy a certain product at a pharmacy, you will always get a number. What is the probability of headache if you buy a headache relief? There is, I think it's 1 in 100 or 1 in 10, but they will give you the number. And I think what we can see is that those numbers, that reflection needs to be more present in devices than it has ever been.
And what if you make updates along the way? You know, both pre-market and post-market. How do you work with these changes? And where do the changes come from?
I would say most of the time in development, we see it through the stages. So it's the tests. During the test, we see updates. Post-market, it's your surveillance. So it's when you get complaints, when you get maybe user feedback and so on, then you get some input that you might need to update your risk management or risk analysis on. And then from there, you need to go through your plan. Is your plan okay? Go through your analysis. And then from your analysis, you create a new report. And then the last document that you also need, which is very important, is your risk management review. So top management need to review or depending on how your structure in the company is, you have set a certain group that needs to do a management review of your risk management. And that's very important because if you miss it, you don't follow the standard.
Exactly. And I think now wrapping up this session, we move into the clinical, and this is where these residual risk is actually of great importance, and that the management is aware. We step into a clinical evaluation, finding out how to test this, and make sure that the level is actually as we claimed in the risk management procedure. So that's a cliffhanger for the next session. So thank you very much, Søren.
You're welcome.